When insurance executives banned Steve McQueen from motorcycle stunts, they thought they were protecting a $4 million film. They had no idea they'd just declared war on Hollywood's most rebellious star. What happened next turned the great escape from a war movie into Steve's personal rebellion against the system. 1962, Bavaria. On the set of The Great Escape, a war was about to begin. But this battle wouldn't be fought in Nazi camps. It would be waged between Hollywood's power structures and one man's unbreakable will. Steve McQueen arrived on set that morning to receive devastating news that would change everything. Harold Morrison, United Artists insurance representative, was waiting with a thick folder of legal documents. Morrison was the embodiment of corporate control, clean-shaven gray suit, calculating eyes that saw only numbers and liability. "Mr. McQueen, I'm sorry, but you can no longer participate in motorcycle stunts. Company policy." Steve slowly set down his coffee cup. His voice was calm but carried an undertone of danger. "What do you mean I can't?" Morrison opened his folder, revealing pages of insurance calculations. "This is a $4 million production. If you get injured, the entire film shuts down. Daily losses would be $50,000. Our insurance company simply won't cover this risk." This wasn't just a ban. This was an attack on Steve's very identity. He'd specifically designed the Hiltz character to popularize motorcycle culture in Hollywood. A cool POW seeking freedom on two wheels, a rebellious spirit breaking free from confinement. Now they were forbidding him from living the character he'd created. Director John Sturges tried to smooth the situation. "Steve, you'll do most of the other scenes. The village chase sequences, narrow street escapes. We'll only use Bud Ekins for the big jump." Bud Ekins was Steve's closest friend, the Triumph dealer from Sherman Oaks and one of Hollywood's most talented stuntmen. They'd raced together in desert competitions, developed off-road techniques. But Steve's ego couldn't handle being sidelined for his own vision. Morrison continued with corporate coldness. "Mr. Ekins is an experienced professional with all necessary safety certifications. You're the star of a $4 million film. He's just a stuntman." That phrase, "just a stuntman," hit Steve like a physical blow. As if people's worth was measured purely by their insurance value. Steve stood up, his blue eyes blazing with that familiar rebellious fire. "I understand, Mr. Morrison, but I need you to understand something too. Is this decision absolutely final? Completely final? Your contract clearly states you cannot participate in any activities banned by the insurance company." But this wasn't a genuine smile. This was the smile of a man who'd just accepted a challenge and was already formulating plans. "All right, gentlemen. Rules are rules. I'll respect that decision." Morrison visibly relaxed. But Sturges worried. He knew Steve's personality. When the actor got this calm after being told no, it usually meant he was plotting something spectacular. That night Steve found his loophole. The insurance banned dangerous motorcycle stunts, but regular motorcycle use wasn't prohibited. Hollywood's golden rule: what's not in your contract is allowed. The next morning Steve picked up a Wehrmacht uniform. Gray-green jacket, boots, helmet. This wasn't just a costume, this was his freedom plan. "Steve, what are you doing?" asked Assistant Director Robert Relia. "The stunt soldiers can't ride fast enough. I'll play the German soldier chasing Hiltz." Relia immediately understood the brilliance. Steve wasn't doing stunts, he was taking roles in action scenes. A critical legal difference. "But you're the main character, why take a stunt role?" Steve winked. "For Hiltz to look like he's really escaping, the motorcycles chasing him need to be fast too." On filming day, Steve mounted his Triumph TR6 trophy in Wehrmacht uniform. When cameras rolled, something unprecedented happened. Steve McQueen was literally chasing himself. Through camera angles and editing, he was simultaneously the escaping POW and the pursuing Nazi. From wide shots, viewers would see Hiltz being chased by Germans. In reality, Steve McQueen was chasing Steve McQueen. This wasn't just cinematic trickery, it was philosophical irony, a metaphor for a man battling his own limitations. As days passed, Steve grew bolder. Morrison watched filming, but Steve technically wasn't breaking rules. Each day, Steve made scenes slightly more challenging. Faster speeds, sharper turns, longer jumps. When Morrison confronted him about speeding, Steve countered, "Which speed limit did I exceed? Is there a written speed limit in my contract?" There wasn't. Steve had found every loophole. Every evening, Steve stayed on set with Bud. "Rehearsing for tomorrow," he told the crew. But something deeper was happening. An unspoken competition between friends. Bud was a Catalina Grand Prix champion, 3-time Big Bear winner. Steve was Hollywood royalty, but lacked Bud's technical knowledge. "Steve, this jump is different," Bud explained, examining the ramps. 12 feet height, 65 feet distance at 60 mph. No margin for error. If you can do it, so can I, Steve replied. This isn't about ego, this is about physics. But Steve had that familiar light in his eyes, the look of a man accepting a challenge. Throughout the week, secret rehearsals continued. Steve learned Bud's techniques, how to approach, balance in air, prepare for landing, cut the throttle before the ramp, Bud instructed. The motorcycle flies silently. Too much gas and you lose balance. These weren't just stunt lessons, they were life philosophy sessions. Bud treated Steve like a real person, not a Hollywood star. Fear is normal, Bud said, but you have to master it. Morrison never knew about these rehearsals. They were friends hanging out, technically outside insurance coverage. Each night, Steve progressed, first examining ramps, then testing at low speed, finally doing small jumps. Each step prepared him for what came next. Steve, what are you really doing? Bud asked when Steve started serious jumps. Learning. No, you're taking on a challenge. Steve stopped the motorcycle. Bud, when you do that jump, I can't just stand there watching. Do you understand? Bud understood. This was Steve's character. He'd never been a spectator. Monday, July 23, 1962. A date destined for cinema history. The entire set buzzed with tension as Bud prepared for the legendary jump. Steve arrived in civilian clothes, officially an observer, but he was analyzing everything. Bud checked the Triumph one last time. Perfect condition. The crew measured ramps, angle calculated from years of experience. The barbed wire was fake, wrapped with rubber for safety, but looked authentic. Cameraman Relia took position. One take only, no second chances. Morrison stood at safe distance, recording everything. Bud, ready? Sturgis shouted. Bud started the engine. The Triumph's sound echoed through Bavarian valleys. Camera. Bud accelerated. 20 mAh, 30. Steve memorized every detail. Body position, throttle application, timing. At the critical moment, Bud cut throttle. The motorcycle silently rose into air, 12 feet height. Triumph soaring, Bud maintaining perfect balance. Over the barbed wire, covering 65 feet, perfect landing. Bud controlled the motorcycle, stopped. 5 seconds of silence, then exploding applause. Cinema history's most famous stunt, completed in one take. Even Morrison smiled. Perfect result without insurance risk. But for Steve, the real plan was just beginning. That evening, while everyone celebrated Bud's historic achievement, Steve quietly slipped away from the festivities. In the Bavarian hills, approximately 2 miles from the filming location, he found himself completely alone with his personal Triumph. Moonlight transformed the snowy mountain peaks into silver sculptures, and an otherworldly silence dominated the valley. Steve methodically examined his motorcycle, same model as Bud's TR6 trophy, but this time there were no safety measures, no insurance protection, no backup plan, no rescue crew standing by, just Steve McQueen, his motorcycle, and that infamous barbed wire fence. What no one knew was that Steve was about to attempt the exact same jump that had just made cinema history, defying every insurance ban, every studio executive's order, every rule that had been imposed on him. This wasn't merely about ego or proving a point, this was about discovering the absolute limits of his own capabilities. Steve carefully put on his helmet, not the official safety gear used in filming, but his own personal helmet, battle-scarred from countless desert races. This helmet bore the scratches and scuffs that told the story of his real identity, not his Hollywood persona. He started the engine. The Triumph's distinctive throaty sound cut through the night silence like a declaration of war against every authority that had tried to contain him. That familiar rumble gave Steve profound confidence. This machine was his oldest ally, his most trusted companion through dozens of races and adventures. First approach, slow reconnaissance, testing the ramps, measuring approach angles with the precision of an engineer. Everything appeared identical to the daylight setup, but night changed everything. Limited visibility, heightened risks, no margin for error. Second run, 30 mil approach, checking the approach trajectory. Engine sound steady and strong, suspension responding perfectly to every subtle adjustment. Third pass, 40 mil approach, now approaching at genuinely serious speed. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his hands remained rock steady on the handlebars. He recognized this sensation intimately. Pure adrenaline, laser-sharp concentration, that absolute focus that separated professionals from amateurs. Steve brought the motorcycle to a complete stop. This was the moment of absolute commitment. Either he would successfully clear that fence, or he would meet those steel wires at 60 mil approach with no witnesses, no medical team, no safety net of any kind. He closed his eyes and heard Bud's voice echoing in his memory. Fear is completely normal, Steve. Fear keeps you alive. But you absolutely must control that fear. Master it. Transform it into fuel. Opening his eyes, Steve felt the fear coursing through him. But he was channeling it, controlling it, using it as energy rather than letting it paralyze him. He twisted the throttle. The motorcycle gained speed. 25, 30. Steve prepared for the ramp moment. 35, 40, 45. Steve cut throttle like Bud had done. 60 mile and Payrek. He hit the ramp. Silence. World stopped. Steve soared through air, feeling truly free. This moment was pure. Him and physics laws. No insurance company, no executives, no rules, just freedom. 12 feet height, barbed wire beneath, 65 feet distance, perfect landing.
Both wheels touched simultaneously. He stopped, helmet off, smiling. That night, Steve hadn't just jumped a fence, he'd transcended every Hollywood boundary, defied insurance bans, replicated his stuntman success. Most importantly, he'd proven to himself, no one could limit him. Next morning, crew discovered fresh tire tracks. Morrison investigated. They came from Steve's motorcycle. Worse, a local villager reported hearing motorcycle sounds around 11:30 p.m. Morrison confronted Steve. A jump was performed last night, without permission. Your motorcycle. Steve didn't blink. Serious accusations. Do you have proof? Enough evidence. Enough isn't legal. Do you have concrete proof I made that jump? Morrison grew angry. You violated your contract. Which contract? Steve remained calm. Insurance ban applies during filming hours. Midnight was personal time. Morrison was stunned. Steve was right. Contract only covered filming hours. I legally violated nothing. Steve continued. Also, did I admit to making that jump? Steve had admitted nothing. Only answered questions with questions. Director Sturges intervened. Harold, filming's complete. The jump scene is recorded. Morrison realized he'd lost. Steve had both violated the ban and remained legally protected. When The Great Escape hit theaters, everyone praised Bud's magnificent jump. But insiders knew the real story. Steve's secret rebellion. Years later, Chad McQueen said, "My father didn't just do a stunt that night. He defined his character. No one could tell him you can't." Steve never fully revealed this story. He told media, "Bud did a magnificent jump. I was just learning." But close friends knew the truth. When asked on Johnny Carson's show, "Was that jump yours?" Steve smiled. "Johnny, that scene's in the film. Who did it doesn't matter. What matters is the result." The truth. That night in Bavarian hills, Steve transcended Hollywood's boundaries. He defied insurance rules and discovered his limits. The Great Escape remains motorcycle culture's most important film. Triumph manufactures special Steve McQueen models. Off-road racers still reference that jump. But the real legacy, Steve proved a man could create his own rules. When the system told him you can't, Steve answered, "Watch me." The insurance company tried to stop Steve, but actually made him stronger. Steve McQueen never accepted "I can't" as an answer. The Great Escape became his permanent symbol of freedom struggle. Such rebellion was never seen again in Hollywood, because there was never another Steve McQueen. He wasn't just an actor, he was a legend, and legends write their own rules.